FPL double game week 28 final decisions. We still don't know if the most highly owned and highly captain player this week in Dominic Solanke is actually going to be fit and available. A lot of you are looking at free hit 29 or rolling your transfers and going into that week as well. So what should you be doing in both of those situations? Plus, every week in FPL, we have more injury updates. So today, we're going to cover everything you need to make your final decisions ahead of game week 28. What is up, everyone? FPL Harry here. Before we dive in, 1,000 likes is the aim, and I apologise having to always ask to subscribe, but we are less than 2,000 subscribers away from 100k. So if everyone who's watching this video who's not subscribed, click that subscribe button, we would hit that before the end of today. But diving straight in and having a look at some of the injury updates, we're going to cover the main one first, which is of course Dominic Solanke, who is the standout captaincy option going into the doubling game week 28, because of course he has Sheffield United at home and Luton at home. Probably the best double you could possibly ask for, maybe Burnley in there instead of Luton, but it's still the best double we're going to get this season. A lot of you played your triple captaincy earlier on in the season, and we'll talk about that a bit later, but should you be buying him and should you be captaining him this week? So we heard before the Burnley game that he didn't train at all last week and then took training on Friday and on Saturday before the game on Sunday. We've heard this week that he has taken part in partial training throughout the week. They need to be careful with him, and he will have a late test before the game on Saturday. Personally, I think he'll come through okay. These are two massive games for Bournemouth. If they beat Sheffield United and they beat Luton, they'll be in a position where, in theory, they don't need to play Dominic Solanke for the rest of the season because they will be safe from relegation. If they were to go into these games without him, we saw them be pretty poor against Burnley, even with a half-fit Dominic Solanke. If they were to lose these two games, which is very, very unlikely, but without Solanke it is possible, then they would be in a little bit more trouble. My personal opinion is they will do their best to get Solanke to start both of these games, have a big rest over the international break, and just take a lot of care with him in the final few weeks of the season. So if you don't own him, I still would consider buying him, and he's still, as a spoiler, going to be my captain this week. Moving into Spurs, the first one is Richarlison. Richarlison spoke to the media, so we heard that Richarlison was meant to be out until the international break, and then Richarlison said to the Brazilian media that he is expecting to be back in the squad for this Aston Villa game. It sounds like Richarlison has lied there. He has not been taking part in any training. He's still continuing his rehabilitation, and it sounds like Richarlison said that to try and increase his chances of being in the Brazil squad over the international break, which takes place after game week 29, but it still looks very unlikely that he'll feature before that break in the blank in game week 29, and is definitely ruled out this weekend. Of course, that is good for Son. If you own him or you're looking at buying him, he should be up front this week and will likely start up front against Fulham in game week 29. Elsewhere at Spurs, we do have more positive news. Pedro Porro has been declared fit and available. Of course, we got positive news about Udogie, who started last week, so Spurs should have both of their first choice fullbacks going into game week 28. Now, a few others. At Newcastle, unfortunately, Kieran Trippier has been ruled out until at least the international break. We have heard from Eddie Howe in previous weeks, him say things about injuries that haven't necessarily come true, but it does sound like we won't be seeing Kieran Trippier until at least game week 30. Now, Chelsea away this week, followed by a blank. A lot of us didn't rely on him, but the key thing that was mentioned was he's not guaranteed that he'll play against West Ham at home in game week 30. Now, personally, I think that's a little bit of an excuse, meaning he doesn't have to go away on international duty. Of course, Trippier might want to be in the squad, will want to be in the squad for the Euros, but I do think Trippier will probably be back in game week 30, but we will not see him before then. So if you need a defender, he is a sell. Elsewhere, we look at Arsenal, one of the most highly owned players in the game, one of the most informed players. Bukayo Saka is yellow flagged. He got taken off at half-time against Sheffield United, and we all thought it was a rest, but we then heard that he did have a little bit of illness. Apparently, it has reduced the amount that he's been able to train so far this week, but we are expecting him to be back and available to start against Brentford. If you own him, definitely do start him. And the final one is looking at Luton. There are a couple of injury concerns. Amari Bell and Adebayo, both the two that maybe have a little bit of ownership, are not going to be playing at all in the double and are unlikely to feature again before the international break. The final few injuries, we start at Bournemouth, and that is Senesi. Unfortunately, we're not going to see Senesi until after the international break. The positive news is that the injury is unlikely to be majorly serious, and he should be back in and around game week 30 to 32, which is in a pretty short space of time, but he's not going to be featuring in the double. So unfortunately, if you own him, you will need to be selling him this week. Neto at Wolves, not the Bournemouth goalkeeper, but Neto at Wolves has been declared fit to start if you did go with him over Hwang Hee-chan at home to Fulham. And finally at Liverpool, we have Joe Gomez available. Konate we are unsure of, but the main ones we're looking at, Trent Alexander-Arnold is still out. Darwin and Salah are available for selection. Now, Salah is a player we all want for game week 30 and onwards, but if you're looking at Kevin De Bruyne in your team and you want to move to Mo Salah, given the updates we've had on Salah, that is a transfer I do quite like this week. Now, to answer a few of the most commonly asked questions all this week, the first of which, let's start at the bottom. Should you sell Haaland to buy a double game week striker in either Solanke or particularly Morris this week? Now, the answer, in short, particularly for Morris, is I would do it if you are not free hitting in game week 29. If your plan is to roll through game week 29 and wildcard in either game week 30 or game week 31, I would make that transfer, and I would also make it for a -4. It comes with its risks. Of course it does. You're selling Erling Haaland, the highest goal scorer in the Premier League so far this season. But the games you're going without him, Liverpool away, blank, Arsenal at home. Morris has a double of Crystal Palace and Bournemouth, then Nottingham Forest at home in the blank. So the risk is there, but I do think it is a worthwhile transfer. Are there other players that you should consider taking hits for this week? So yes and no. So if you are free hitting in game week 29 and you want to take a hit to buy Neto, you want to take a hit to buy Dominic Solanke, those are the only two that I really look at that you should consider a hit for. However, if you're looking at a defence that is Ake, you've got a Stupinan in there, you've then got maybe Gabriel, and you want to take a hit for a Bournemouth defender who have nice fixtures from game week 30 onwards, then yes, I would consider that. But if your defence is well set up with maybe double Arsenal and you've got a Doughty, then no, I don't think they are worth a hit. I don't think any midfielders are worth a hit this week. I do not trust the Luton ones. If I had to pick a Luton midfielder, it would probably be Terry Chong over Barkley, who's playing a bit deeper at the moment. And if I had to pick a Bournemouth midfielder, it would probably be Tavernier. But I just don't think either of them are worth a hit. Now, in terms of the Luton players that are worth a hit, again, if you're not free hitting in game week 29, Luton do become a little bit more popular because they double this week and then have Nottingham Forest at home this week. I like Kaminsky, I like Doughty, and I like Morris. Outside of that, I really wouldn't be bothering. Now, just to cover who the top players to buy are across positions this week. To be honest, in goal, there's no one really outside of Neto and Kaminsky that I'd recommend. Some of you might be looking at Leno, who has maybe better long-term fixtures and guaranteed to play in the blank. But if you need a keeper this week, and you're free hitting in 29, you buy Neto. If you're not free hitting in 29, you probably just buy Kaminsky. Into defence, again, the tick you've got here is if they have a fixture in game week 29. So this will change depending on your chip strategy. I prefer Zabanyi at Bournemouth this week, but if Doughty and you need him in game week 29, Doughty is a better buy than the Bournemouth defender. Gabriel sits third, of course, a great fixture this week and some nice fixtures in the future, but no fixture in game week 29. And if you do need a fixture next week, Emerson at West Ham, Burnley at home this week, and a fixture in game week 29. And then we also have Neco Williams. He's actually playing pretty far forward for Nottingham Forest at the moment. He has a little bit of attacking threat and has, of course, a decent fixture away at Luton in game week 29 and decent fixtures from game week 30 onwards as well. Into midfield, I do think Saka will start, so he does stay number one. But if you're not free hitting next week, the likes of Son and Jared Bowen have to be at the top of your list with the additional fixture in the blank. Salah and Palmer are two players that everyone will want in their team from game week 30 onwards, and I don't hate buying them this week. Yes, the fixtures on paper are not the easiest, but they both are playing at home. As I mentioned previously, if you are set on buying a double game week midfielder, if you need one from Bournemouth, it's probably Tavernier, and if you need one from Luton, I would probably punt on Chong over Barkley. Chong is slightly more explosive, but Barkley has slightly more security of minutes. And then up front, I do think Solanke will probably get minutes in both games, so he is number one. Morris is very close behind, and if you need a fixture in game week 29, he is a must buy for you this week. Ollie Watkins 3, again, nice short-term fixtures playing in the blank. and then Semenyo. If Solanke gets reduced minutes, Semenyo should be up front and he'll be a fantastic option for them. But even as a third forward at just 4.6 million, could be a great punt alongside Solanke this week. And finally, it is Muniz at Fulham, a very cheap option, a good fixture this week, decent fixture in game week 29, and Sheffield United in game week 30. Now, some of you are considering playing your wildcard this week, and if you're wildcarding this week, it means you're trying to avoid the free hit in game week 29. I personally don't love the strategy, but if your team needed a lot of repair, this is what a draft I would go with. Areola and Neto, of course, you have the double this week, and Areola plays next week. From game week 30 onwards, they do rotate pretty well as well. Into defence. To be honest, game week 29 in the blank doesn't have great defensive fixtures, so you only have 2 players here guaranteed to play in game week 29 in Doughty and Neco Williams. But Neco Williams is a good long-term hold. Gusto is nice and cheap. Of course, Gabriel, and then the Bournemouth defender as well. Into midfield, Son, Bowen, Alanga are your 3 players guaranteed to play in game week 29, and Saka and Palmer are the 2 players that you just want to hold long-term. Up front, there is no Erling Haaland, there is Morris, Watkins and Solanke. Now, this team leaves an awful lot of money in the bank because in game week 30 and 31, you'll want to bring in Erling Haaland again and you'll want to bring in Mo Salah. Now, this team actually only has 8 players guaranteed to play in game week 29. Take 1 free transfer to get to 9 players. Consider a -4 if you fancy it to get to 10 players. But if you're playing your wildcard this week and you try and put out 11 players next week, it will cause you too many further issues down the line. And then finally, just to wrap up by talking about my team, with the news to Trippier, it probably makes sense to sell him to Gusto, which has been the plan for me most of this week. The only thing that slightly puts me off doing that is the potential double for Newcastle in game week 34, plus having a decent fixture in game week 30 where the rest of my defence have pretty difficult fixtures, right? So Doughty goes away to Spurs in 30. Gabriel has Manchester City. Zabani has a good fixture, but if I sell Trippier, I'm still a defender short. So it doesn't help me with Salah, but I am considering selling Taylor to Gusto instead, because in game week 30, I could then play Trippier, Gusto and Zabani, all with good fixtures this week. I'm pretty certain Gusto will come into my team. It's just whether it's Trippier and Taylor. Now, the other reason I don't mind selling Taylor instead of Trippier is because I'm not certain I'll need as much money for Salah in game week 31 because I might sell Son. If Gordon gets that double in game week 34 as well as Trippier, of course the Newcastle double, I'm not sure I want to sell Gordon either. Now, I've had comments on the first video where I said I'd sell Foden for Salah. People didn't like that. In the last video, I said I'd sell Son for Salah. People didn't like that. You can't own them all, and Salah is a better option than Son and Foden. Now, it will probably be Son because I need the money, and if Son goes back out to the wing with Richarlison coming back in game week 30 or 31, it does make Son a little bit weaker. So Son up to Salah is much easier for me. So Taylor to Gusto does make my life a little bit easier in game week 30 with the defenders that it puts out. So it's pretty close. Right now, I'd probably say I'd favour keeping Trippier and say 60% do Taylor to Gusto and 40% do Trippier to Gusto. The only other transfer that might feel really random that I consider, and I think there's only about a 20% chance that I do it, is actually selling Kaminsky to Neto. And the reason for it, again, is those fixtures from game week 30 onwards. Both Kaminsky and Areola have a difficult fixture in game week 30 and for the next few weeks after that as well. I won't want to use a transfer in and around that period when I'm trying to get Liverpool assets in, more Manchester City assets in, and target the double in 34. So I think Neto is a better option than Kaminsky this week, and I think he's a better option in both 30, 31 and 32 than the goalkeepers I have in my team as well, but it would have to be a hit, which doesn't massively feel like it's worth it given Kaminsky just has a double this week. So Gusto in for one of my defenders on my bench and a 20% chance that I do take a hit for a goalkeeper this week. So that is all for this final decisions video. Of course, there will be a 2-hour deadline stream at 9 o'clock on Saturday morning, all the way up until the FPL deadline, where you can get your questions answered live. That is already scheduled, so click on the link above and set notify. Also leave your questions in the comment section down below. Thank you all so much for watching. 1,000 likes is the aim. Subscribe if you are new around here, and I'll be back again very soon.